Women. What's the dumbest thing a man has genuinely said or believed about women? I had a boyfriend who was very sympathetic about me going to the gyno for a checkup. I thought that was sweet, but then he said the only reason he knew it was that bad was because of his sister and stepsisters. Apparently, the boyfriend of one of his stepsisters was furious about that stepsister going to get her gyno checkup because he thought she was going to get SA'd and she'd like it. Apparently, they fought a lot about it. Can you believe that? What's crazy about that is that my ex-boyfriend said he would not have believed I needed to go get a gyno checkup if his stepsister didn't have that fight with her boyfriend. Story 2. I had a very spiritual ex who believed that most women were werewolves. Literal werewolves. Like that we would shapeshift during a full moon and run around terminating cattle. I thought he was kidding until we were dating for a few months and he very seriously told me he was beginning to trust me and more so trust that I was not, in fact, a werewolf. I was reassured by the fact that I didn't have the time of the month. I had an IUD and he said that's a woman's time of the month aligned with the moon and had to do with her shape-shifting werewolf cycle. He also thought that the fact I had an IUD meant that I was infertile for the rest of my life and was genuinely concerned how he would continue his bloodline if he stayed with me. I tried to explain these things to him, but he just got suspicious that I was covering up possible lycanthropy. He had issues. Story 3. Women only want the top 20% of men. BS that Reddit loves to regurgitate. It's all over the site. It's from old study in a dating app that is taken way out of context and used as a science for the real world, when it shouldn't be. In the same study, women have a higher tendency to message men they don't rate high in attractiveness. Meanwhile, men tend to go for the women they rate high in attractiveness. This part is what is left out when Redditors complain. Story 4. The women get a crust or a scab if we have our time of the month. This took place in a biology lesson in high school. We could write our questions about anything we wanted and put them in a box anonymously, and the teacher would answer them. It was kind of a fun lesson, and it made the whole class open up about stuff, so we kind of started talking about body-related stuff with each other, and it pretty much ended up in a conversation between a group of boys asking the girls all kinds of questions. And that's when this one came out. I didn't know what I was hearing at first, but I don't know, it kind of made sense for him to think that. I just never thought about it before. I'm glad we don't creak every time we take a step during our time of the month, though. Story 5. Women always have tampons in. Story. A friend of a friend made a joke about tampons, and as the only girl in the group, he looked at me and said, "Am I right?" I told him I didn't know because I used cups. He couldn't grasp the concept. I told him, semi-joking, I'd show him mine the next day. He asked why I couldn't show him now. I told him it was because it was at home, and he said, "You don't have it in right now?" When I said I didn't because I wasn't currently on my time of the month, he said, "But what if you start?" This 30-something-year-old man had no idea that number 1, women can track their periods, and number 2, we don't walk around with tampons or cups in 24/7, 365. Story 6. I went through premature menopause at age 37. It's a real thing, but good luck convincing your gyno. Around that time, my dad got into his head that I was slacking in my duty to produce offspring. Now every time I see him, he brings up how I need to have kids soon because it's my duty and I'm getting kind of old. And I cannot convince him that even if I wanted to have kids, I could not, because I'm about 3 years postmenopausal. Over Thanksgiving dinner, I kid you not, he lectured me that his own mother had a baby years after she stopped doing that thing women do, and therefore I can totally still have kids. He cannot bring himself to say the words period or menopause and yet believes firmly that they have nothing to do with fertility. And yes, the fact that he's pressuring me to have kids in the first place would be a stupid move even if I wasn't infertile or hadn't been too sick to have kids for the past 15 years. Story 7. My ex-husband legitimately thought that whenever a woman has intimacy with a new partner, it makes her time of the month start in order to wash the old partner out of her system. He breached this stunning leap of logic after a lady he knew said she was going to a bar to celebrate her divorce and hoped she found a man to wash her ex out of her system. He decided that this meant I was cheating on him when I got my time of the month. It stopped early, we had intimacy, and then it started again. Story 8. My partner and I are well past 79 and have been together almost 20 years, but have known each other since we were kids. He never married, but was hugely, intimately active, having intimacy with more than 200 women. When we were first living together, he informed me that the double-layered panel in the garment is so we can slip a pad in there. I said, "Wait a minute, pads are not that small." He said, "Well, women fold them so they fit. I've been female more than 8 decades. I said, "But that is so wasteful, and besides, that would be too bulky." But he insisted. Then I said, "But what you are describing means we would do it all over the garments if we did that. The point is to put it into the pad." I told him I flatly didn't believe he had ever seen a woman use their pants that way, and I also don't believe any woman ever told him that. It's been years since he made this claim, and he's still angry at me for laughing at this idea. Story 9. This question makes me think of my father. He gave me his family material comforts and a privileged childhood to his kids, then would insult my brother and me for having our own ideas and opinions that differed from his. He believes he's a good person because he pulled himself up by his bootstraps and worked hard. You can still provide for your family and still be a Trump-supporting, Republican, racist, narcissistic piece of crap father who is filled with hate. The dumbest thing he said about me as a woman? I remember the sweet release of him from my life when he had our last phone conversation. Well, you just need to work on yourself and be better than you are. He said this to me when I told him that I voted for Bernie Sanders when he ran. Hi, I am a 41-year-old woman who doesn't fit into a box and has my own ideas and opinions. I don't cook. I am neurodivergent. I'm a liberal. Oh, and get this one too, Dad. I'm gay. I'm free today. Today is my Independence Day. My dad will never make me feel small or stupid or ashamed for being different. I'll no longer have ties with anyone that is cruel and full of hate. Story 10. Okay, this one is technically about a 14-year-old boy rather than a man. I, trans woman, was having a slumber party when I was 12, still living as a boy, and one of my friends' older brothers came by. It was all very cheesy stuff, playing quarters with RC Cola, etc. At one point, the 14-year-old boy said he wished his girlfriend, from Canada no less, were there. He said if she were, she'd be stuffing her full of tampons to get ready for him. Now, being a trans kid and absolutely obsessed with femininity, I understood just how monumentally stupid this boy was being, but I literally couldn't say anything without explaining the time of the month to a room full of boys. I've been carrying that story around for 40 years now. Thanks for asking. Story 11. I once knew a man who thought women laid an egg during their time of the month, and the color of said egg was determined by their mood. Also, inside the egg was a tiny baby, and the red liquid was its tears because it wasn't born. I kid you not, this man firmly believed this. I was very shocked, to say the least. He was going around the bathroom in a deranged egg hunt demanding, "Where is it?" I thought he was a few tacos short of a combo plate, then he explained his views, and I knew he didn't have a menu. He also was a cruel schmuck, so there's that too. Story 12. By far not the worst, but I'm sure I'll be vindicated in the comments because I had no one else to be gobsmacked by. I want to attach a pic so bad, but it's not letting me. But my father disagrees that hip dips are real. Basically, back in the day, a photo of Barbara Palvin modeling for Sports Illustrated went viral and landed on my father's Facebook page. I'll never forget him saying that there was something weird going on with her hips. In one photo, and thus he isn't attracted to her anymore. Look at the image and it's her hip dips. Usually modeling agencies don't pose their models so it's prominent, but since she's in a literal bikini, it was impossible to hide since she was thicker than most models then. I laugh and explain what hip dips are and go to move on when my father looks quizzically and says, See, I don't know, but I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I've looked at women my entire life and I've never seen that. So I explain it's genetic, most models are too thin to have them, and they are hidden during photo shoots, but her hip dips were prominent since all the photos were in bikinis. I explain it's due to her pose and them taking the photo straight on, which just so happens to be the angle at which hip dips are prominent. I finish my point by saying, "Trust me, I'm a woman, it's more common than you think." And he replied, "I've been checking women out for longer than you've been alive. It's not common nor normal. I've never seen that before. She has weird hips and therefore it's not attractive at all. The same way Megan Fox revealed she has a clubbed thumb. They were gorgeous women, but they simply aren't attractive now. They've revealed these freaky facts about their anatomy." He just genuinely would not budge and was ready to argue that he was still right until he was blue in the face. I still think back to this conversation because it felt so unbelievably like a fever dream. Can't believe it actually happened. So yeah, there, girls. It's been decided. My father doesn't believe in hip dips, so if you have them, you're just weird and not attractive to your freaky anatomy. Story 13. This one is actually my favorite, and it is the dumbest one I've heard. I worked with a guy who asked me when I chose to be a woman. I'm a cisgender woman, and I said, "Do you think I'm trans?" I wasn't offended, just a little shocked because he seemed so sincere and kind of nervous in asking. Lol. Nope. He thought, or was taught by family, that women taller than 5'7" were all hermaphrodites, intersex, and they chose to present as women because all natural women can grow taller than that. I'm 5'11". I said I was born a woman and not intersex, and that what he was taught was wildly incorrect. I'm not 100% sure he believed me, but I think it definitely did blow his mind enough that he probably looked into it. Lol. Story 14. Very early into my relationship with my fiancé, I was explaining my family dynamics to him, and I mentioned that I was adopted by my aunt and uncle when I was 2 because my biological mom was 13 years old and in foster care when she had me. This man looked me straight in my eyes and said, "I didn't think you could get pregnant until you were like 16. So I very gently explained to him that no, it is in fact possible for a person to get pregnant from the moment they start having their time of the month. Technically, you can get pregnant before you even have your first one. We then proceeded to have a long conversation about all the ways his school's education program failed him. Story 15. That reading will have a negative impact on our organs. This was from Sandy Toksvig's talk early this year at Cambridge. I have this talk to thank because it made me go down the rabbit hole and opened up my eyes about a lot of things stacked up against women. I got so frustrated that I had to write this piece to get things off my chest. I've forgotten half of our histories and how women's achievements and stories have literally been left out. I'm 40, female, living in Bangkok, and it's still very embedded in our culture to uplift men, overly praise their achievements and hush-hush about their glaringly obvious misdeeds, and downplay women's involvement or achievements for fear of triggering their more fragile ego. And I hope my writing doesn't come across as hateful towards men. I've been together with my husband for over 17 years, and he's my everything, but I can't help but point out what I've observed over the years within my own circle. In Thai societies, or at least the one I'm privy to, it's the women who run the show, so to speak, or the logisticians and organizers who make things happen, but we let the men in the family take over the core narrative. Narcissism is rife in my network, and more so in men, and it's really quite fascinating how blind most of us are to this. I also admit being completely blind to it until it hit me in the face a few years ago. By my own observable stats, 50% of the dads I know have either used those massage parlor services, have a side girl, done a weekend, or just have a full-blown affair out in the open. It's completely normalized here in a way that you don't even talk about it. Story 16. I knew 2 real incels personally when I was in high school, and they actually did believe in all of this women-hating crap. One of them could be a case study with how fast he lost his fedora once he was 2 drinks in. It was scary. He went from apologizing for being a schmuck last Friday and asking me to let him pour me a drink to, all women are witches and it's freaking ridiculous how you're putting yourself out there and teasing men with your body only to then reject them. Now pour me a drink, which it's the woman's duty after all. His eyes also changed, like something clicked in him, but in a very bad way. He also stole my phone, and that's when I last saw him. The other one wasn't outright aggressive towards women, but was an alcoholic and had very sexist opinions in both men and women. He believed a man's strength is directly linked to how many other men he could harm, and a woman's value is based on how good she can cook. Both of them, by the way, were grown mid-20s dudes who hung out with high school-age kids and tried to hit on girls. Story 17. I had a guy I was seeing tell me completely randomly, "Did you know that the cycle isn't 28 days for every woman? There are some that have 27 days, some have 29 days, and some even more or less." He was acting like he just presented me the newest scientific discovery and like I should be astonished by that. In that moment, I thought it was funny, but later I was just amazed by the audacity to tell that to a woman, thinking he knew more about it than me. Like, how little do some men think women know? Also, he was a mechanical engineer and I'm a nurse. Like, what? Story 18. I used to be friends with this guy who genuinely thought people, especially women, shouldn't complain about getting essayed because it's just validation or a sign you're attractive. Apparently, objectification equals compliments in his galaxy-brained world. He also believed that once our stuff has been stretched by a large thing, it can never properly take a smaller one again. Also, according to him, nothing can ever go wrong during a pregnancy unless it's an ectopic one. I think it's safe to say I did myself a favor cutting him off when I did. His logic was like a black hole. Once you get too close, you just lose all common sense. On an extra note, I also had a different guy tell me, "I wish a hot woman would do that to me." I told him about the time I was stalked and followed by weirdo work for a whole hour before he walked towards me and exposed himself. So I then said to him, "So consent doesn't matter to you if the perpetrator is attractive?" And he just responded with, "I guess not. Lol." Story 19. The high maintenance thing. Now that I'm older, when I hear a man say this, I immediately know 3 things. It's manipulative, he's cheap, he's objectifying. Often women are labeled this way by men who don't have the capacity to handle it and or want to have a commitment-free, low-key relationship. Even if that's what I want, a man who says things like that is a red flag. High maintenance can mean all sorts of things, but some men will say this because they will never take you out to a steak dinner. Others will say it because they want to be able to relax if they take you camping. Neither of these things are horrible, but there are better ways to communicate your expectations besides calling someone high maintenance. High maintenance can mean different things, but in general, it seems to imply that the person labeled this might not be worth the effort to date them. If they actually have some experience with a person and realize that this is beyond their capability, that's one thing, but labeling someone is not okay. I've never been labeled high maintenance, but I have basically been told I was not low maintenance enough, which was a gift. Story 20. My coworker once explained to me that since I have turned 30, my cycle, meaning my period, I don't think he even knew what he meant, is going to expire and my eggs would dry up soon. It goes on to explain how women's hormones sync with the moon and environment around them. This is why women in countries like India have more children. The woman's uterus is closer to the moon in countries further north from us, and their periods are like tides and produce more eggs. I asked him to further elaborate, and he said he didn't want to talk about gross stuff like this anymore. He now has a 1-year-old daughter. This is one example. Anytime he's late and I call him out, his literal response is, "Well, you don't have kids." I usually respond with, "Nope, just hella disposable income. Welcome to the sales world, bro." Story 21. A recent one was at work for me. I'm a waitress and I was clearing dishes off tables when someone else's customer waved me over to him. By the time I made it to his table, just him, he had laid his head flat on the table, staring intensely at a table in another coworker's section. "Need anything?" He pointed at a table in the distance with his head still on the table. "You ladies aren't cleaning these tables very well." "Oh, well, that one's still dirty. Someone just He picked his head up and cut me off. You can't see it from your angle, but there are cup rings on all of the tables. Spoiler, there weren't. You want me to wipe your table down? No, mine's fine. All of the others are dirty, though. He then proceeded to explain and demonstrate in the air the proper motion to use when wiping off a table. I was trying to manage my facial expression so it didn't come off rudely, but it must have come off as confused or something because he got frustrated and tried to repeat a spiel on how towels work, so I shot him a "sorry about that, I'll make sure to tell someone," and left. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 23. When I was in college, getting my BFA in studio art, I worked as a stage carpenter in my school's theater. Started doing it in high school, so by the time I was a senior, I had a few years' experience. I had a friend who was a student in my school's conservatory, and his senior project was an opera that he wrote with another senior. At the beginning of the year, he asked me to be the set designer and TD for the show. It was a smaller production, and I had a few other students that I took on to help me, so I said yes. Fast forward to Tech Week, the week before the show opens. Between runs, I went to the nearby hardware store to pick up a few things that I didn't have on location, including a cheap brush for touch-ups. So even though I'm dressed in obvious carpenter clothing, jeans with lots of worn areas and completely covered in paint, steel-toed boots, etc., I'm a girl in a hardware store. Part of me always expects an employee to ask if I need help because, hey, it's their job. And also I'm a girl in a hardware store. Most of the time the interactions are pleasant, but a few times I've definitely been treated like a girl who knows nothing. This time I'm running in and out, and I've been to this hardware store before and I know exactly what I need and where it is. I get to the paint section and step back from the row so I can see what they have, while I weigh what brush will work best for what I need at the cheapest price. An older man who's not an employee is in the same aisle. He asks me what I'm looking for. I'm in a bit of a rush and I don't need help, so I give a kind of non-answer, something like, just a paintbrush. This man proceeds to tell little old me, with paint in her hair and on her clothes, about the different types of paintbrushes and starts making suggestions to me, even though he has no idea what I need it for. When I reach for a cheap touch-up brush, he proceeds to tell me the colloquial name for it and that it's a cheap brush that you can just throw away after you're done. I'm still completely baffled by the way he talked to me, like I was unrecognizable as a professional. I know this isn't even that bad when it comes to being a woman in a hardware store. Story 24. I became a TV producer at a young age. I had a small crew and we were hired to film behind the scenes in another production. I didn't have an assistant, so I took care of getting on camera releases from the other crew, the one we were there to film. One of the camera operators refused to sign, telling me he was part of the actors union and he wouldn't sign without his agent. That's cool, I get it. So I announced to my crew to avoid filming him. He called me over and explained to me how to do my job. Next time, the right response would be to go get your producer and have him handle it. I looked him straight in the eye and said, I am the producer. And damn did it feel good to see him go white as a ghost. It's a small industry I work in. He harmed himself in the foot that day. Story 25. I'm a specialized translator from English to French, and I have a bachelor's degree in translation. A man who did not study translation as intermediate in English tried to explain to me how I did my translation wrong. I then explained to him how 3 words in English can be translated by only 2 words in French because, in French, one of the 2 words carries 2 meanings at once. Just because you speak a little of another language does not make you able to translate it. That is why I studied translation for 3 years. That guy does not know enough English to have a conversation. A classical example of a man who knows nothing about my job or field of study and tried to explain to me my job or field of study. Story 26. I manage restaurants for a living. One time, this guy ordered a soup to go. When I gave it to him, he told me that the soup is larger when he orders it when he's dining in. I explained to him that it's a 5-ounce portion. The bowl just looks larger when it's for dine-in guests because, well, that's how it's designed. He argued with me for long enough that I got the 5-ounce ladle and brought it full of soup in an empty soup cup to go. I ladled it into a bowl for dine-in and then into the to-go soup cup, and he still didn't believe me. He refuses to leave, so I went to get him another soup to go in the house to get rid of him. The male manager I worked alongside asked what I was doing, so I told him, and he went and just told the guy, that's the same size as when you eat it here. The guy thanked him and left, without the extra soup, because all he needed was another man to say it. Story 27. This will get buried, but I'm a female assistant editor for film and TV. It's a very technical job. It requires a lot of organization and experience. You work side by side with the editor, and above both of you is a post supervisor who manages the department. Post supervisors are almost always wannabe editors who failed up. They have technical skills, but usually no drive or creativity. They are almost always excellent at letting assistants do their work and solve their problems and then taking the credit. They're also excellent at sidestepping blame when something goes wrong. I've never met one I liked. At any rate, I'm on a job and the soup is probably the biggest tool I've ever met. Plus, he understands jack all about the workflow. At one point, as we're finishing a movie, he asks the open office why a film is split into 20-minute reels during finishing. I explain that so minor adjustments can be made at the last minute to have one reel without affecting others. Can't believe I have to explain this to someone who has supposedly done this for 20 years or whatever. A few days later, he's giving a producer a walkthrough, and I overhear him explaining that he's guiding us through the important step of splitting the film into reels and why it needs to be done. A few days later, that producer calls me and explains to me that another movie of theirs is entering post and how important it is to split it into reels. The kicker was, a pre-production meeting on the next movie where that freaking post supervisor started explaining to me what reels were. And that's the film industry for women. Story 28. When I was pregnant with my daughter, my boyfriend told me that he wasn't taking me to the hospital until my water had broken. Now I had a son from a previous relationship, and when I gave birth to my son, I had to have the doctor break my water for me. I told my boyfriend that my water would probably not break on its own and he would be taking me to the hospital when my contractions got to be 1 minute long, every 5 minutes, for 1 hour. 151 rule. He then tried to explain to me that my water would break before I went into labor so we wouldn't have to worry about the 151 rule. Well, when I was in labor with my daughter, I felt super vindicated when he watched as the doctor broke my water for me. Story 29. Okay, this one is pretty goofy, but I dated a guy who ended up throwing an actual temper tantrum because he told me anime was invented in the 70s. A date I'm pretty sure he pulled out of his bum. I was an art student at the time who was very interested in the history of cartooning, animation, comics, and manga, so I knew right away that wasn't right. Osamu Tezuka, also known as the godfather of anime, published some of his first works around 1945. I showed him examples from all sorts of artists from every decade, and he literally locked himself in the basement and refused to talk to me the rest of the night. Story 30. I was an intern for a tech company, having just graduated with my BA in computer science with a minor in business. I sat next to a dude in a bus going to an event who, without knowing what my degree was, told me that BAs in computer science are totally pointless and one should only get a BS, especially for developers, blah blah blah. Now for any outsiders here, the difference between a BA and BS in computer science is not necessarily the coding classes, but actually what math classes you take. You take more math with a BS and a few more engineering courses. It's pretty easy to take the same amount of coding classes between the two. I chose to get a BA so I would have time to get a business minor and make myself more marketable for management roles and analytics as well. I gave him a look that could terminate someone and told him BS on his BS. I was about to get a job at the company and I was furious this dude was acting like such a schmuck. Story 31. A signature. I digitally signed a document and emailed it to him. He answered that I did not sign the document, which is a thing that happens frequently because loads of agencies still can't accept digital signatures. So I replied with my standard, "The document is digitally signed. Is that okay or do you need a wet signature?" I received back a long, rambly email explaining to me what a signature was, how historically, in business, a signature signifies that a person gives their approval to whatever is included in the document and how one should sign their name. I think I read it 3 times before calling my friend in, who read it and said, "That guy just told you how to write your name at the bottom of the paper." Story 32. I was packaging meat. Exciting, I know. Anyway, I was packing 6 sausage links to a bag before placing them to my left for the next step, where they got sealed. This was assembly line type work. You do your job and the next person does theirs and so on and so forth. Well, of course, the people before me were finishing earlier than me, as I was the second to last step. The guy who was cutting the sausage right before me finished, then looked around. He noticed me and came over to help me. Came over, saw how I was packing the meat, and then told me I was doing it wrong. He then had the audacity to tell me how to pack the sausages. By the way, I had already packed about 70 of the 80 to 85 bags that were getting done that day. So now, as I was continuing to package the sausage, I had him next to me, mansplaining in my ear exactly how to package the meat. And his words, of course, mimicked exactly what I had been doing all along. And his words were just reflecting my exact motions. Worst, or best, part, I told him to stop mansplaining to me, only to have him tell me he's not, and then have him mansplain to me what mansplaining actually is. Story 33. My nationality. So I look pretty ethnically ambiguous. People guess or assume that I'm Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, or Hispanic at pretty much the same frequency. My friend and I were once traveling through Serbia last year and got to talking with an old man on the train. He asked us where we were from, and I explained that my friend is from Finland, but we both live and study in Sweden. And then he said, "But you're Spanish, right?" Me. No, I'm Swedish. Old man. "But really, you're Spanish, though." Me. "Well, ethnically it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I don't think I have any relations in Spain, and I've lived in Sweden my whole life, so I do consider myself Swedish." Old man. "Are you sure you're not Spanish? You look Spanish." Me. "I'm not." Old man. "No, you are." After a few rounds of similar comments, I changed seats. Story 34. My ex at the time tried to explain to me in a convoluted way that if you cut a 3D ball in half, you'd see a 2D circle from a straight angle, then you would tilt the cut surface and you'd see what? He wanted to impress me with his correct answer after I would obviously fail. It was so weird I didn't get it at first, and I was like, "Duh, an ellipse?" He was shocked as his engineering professor had told him this riddle in class, and no woman can solve this since we have no spatial insight. At the time, I was only mildly annoyed, but it makes me boil thinking back on it now. I can only imagine how that professor treated female students. Story 35. Last year, our internet wasn't working for almost a week, and resetting the router didn't work, so I had to call our provider's hotline. I told the guy that the internet hadn't been working for 5 days, that I'd already called the hotline a few times, and that I'd tried resetting the router multiple times. Despite me telling him this, I heard him clicking through my customer files for a bit, then he told me, "It says here that you moved in April, right?" It was July. Me, confused. "Yeah? Why?" He, "Well, you know that you have to install the router in your new place, right?" I know he works at a hotline and has to deal with a lot of stupid people, but I honestly was offended that he thought it was that stupid. Also, he clearly didn't listen to me nor read my files correctly. Story 36. One time a man tried to tell me how a period worked. By the way, I am a woman. present as a woman and obviously have had a few in my day. Well, the egg is released and comes down the tube. If the white liquid doesn't join up with it at that point, she will shed the cell and witch about it for a week. I asked him how he thought a period worked if we were just getting rid of a single cell. Well, obviously, there's a lot of trauma that comes from losing a single cell, so there would be a ton of red liquid. How much? Maybe a half gallon or so. When he noticed my eyes widen in shock, he said, I know, a lot, right? So now I know this guy is obviously a total expert. And he asked him why the cramps happen. He said, and I quote, "You witchers are just angry you didn't have intimacy enough that month." Oh my god, I've never laughed so hard at a man. Story 37. Once I saw my friend from school. I stopped to say hi. I asked him what he was doing. He said he was studying science and maths in junior college. That's a great field, and maths is the language of the universe, so I responded cheerfully. He asked me what I was doing. I replied that I was in the art stream and would opt for my dual degree, BA-LLB. He said, I just pity everyone who chooses the arts field. Dumb field, but it is for dumb people, so it serves them right. Actually, except maths, science, and economics, everything else is BS for dumb people. He went on to explain that to me, and I couldn't reply. I agree that maths and science are great subjects, beautiful even. That's just disappointing that a person who studies the language and functioning of the universe could not understand how to respect every branch of knowledge. So I didn't come up with a comeback, or even if I did, it just didn't feel right to insult the field of knowledge just because someone studying it was being a schmuck, so I said goodbye to him and walked away. Story 38. An Italian guy trying to help an American and the chemist in Italy kept asking for the wrong thing. The queue was building up. Eventually, I pepped up and told the chemist what the girl was looking for. The guy whipped around and started ranting about how he's an English teacher at the local high school and definitely speaks better English than me and how I should respect my elders. I was 21. He was in his late 40s, I think. I waited for him to finish, looking at him blankly, and then I told him, I am English. He stormed out. Nothing to do with being a man, but everything to do with having a superiority complex. Story 39. Why I, as an Asian lady, was giving up while playing pool and not, just bad at it since I never actually play pool. This was because he did a tour around Asia and was now an expert in Asian women. He basically said that when Asian women start to lose, they just give up and don't try, and that's why Eastern culture is still fairly behind in feminism. Except it was a lot more verbose and high and mighty. Mind you, he was a random dude that decided to butt into my and my male friend's game, whom he decided to help learn to play while leaving me high and dry just to watch in between plays, which I didn't mind until he started spewing that BS. The best thing, though, was he somehow thought we became friends and he had a chance with me, and I shot his ego down hella hard. Of course, he acted like a baby, all passive-aggressive about being rejected. Story 40. One day I was out with a male friend and I expressed annoyance at the fact guys kept oogling at my melons. It's not that I put them fully on display. There might be a little, but nothing over the top. They just happened to be big melons. My friend replied that I couldn't blame men for staring at me because men have a primal drive to sow their oats in as many women as possible, and melons are an intimate object. Object? Doesn't sound like the right word for it, but whatever. So I shouldn't be surprised for getting the attention because I was increasing their drive. It's kind of sad because I like the belief that men aren't uncontrollable fiends who have absolutely no discipline or self-control when they see sexy things. I feel like that's giving men way too little credit. Story 41. So this guy in college, 2008, who was my best friend, walked up to a group of girls and announced to all of us that it's entirely the woman's fault that they get pregnant. Picture horror movie style, all of us craned our heads toward him with absolute animosity. I saved him and took him aside, saying, "Hey, I told him you were having some sort of bad day and to excuse you. Tell me what's wrong. You are clearly sick because you told all of those girls it's their fault they get pregnant. Guess you're not getting any, ever." He proceeded to tell me how women's stuff pulled in the white liquid, therefore making it their fault. Calmly, I said, "Please tell me where you got this information." He told me he read an old medical book in the library from the 1300s that revealed this knowledge, and since it was in the book, it was true. Cue 30 minutes of trying to get him to realize white liquid doesn't magically appear, that it still takes two people to tango, and he still did not get it. He refused to get it for 3 days and only came to his senses after none of the female friends in the group would hang out with the guys. A 1300s medical book is indeed a book, but gosh darn it, no. Use current information and don't find things that fit your narrative. Story 42. Ever since I was a kid, I've had 1 or 2 cavities every time I went to the dentist. I never had a big sweet tooth and I brushed my teeth as often as any kid does, but it never failed, and I always got one. My brother, on the other hand, loved sugar and always made sure to eat candy if it was available, but he never got a cavity until he was 17. Go figure. I went to the dentist last week to get a tooth pulled, got an x-ray, and lo and behold, I have a cavity. I explained my history to the dentist and asked him why my brother didn't get cavities but I do, and he said, with no humor in his voice, "I've found, in my experience, that men tend to go for sports drinks while women like sweeter drinks like frappuccinos. The excess sugar hurts their teeth and makes them more prone to cavities." Silence. I stared at him, waiting for him to say he was joking. Nothing. I said, "Well, I don't like sweets and I don't care for coffee." He just goes, "Oh, well, then I don't know. So obviously I'm going to cut all those fraps out of my diet." I've been supporting a crazy fixation ever since I was a child, and this was my wake-up call. Story 43. I once attended this college my dad worked at for a semester to finish up 2 classes I needed to graduate. My youngest brother was also there. He happened to be friends with a guy who used to attend the school, and after meeting the guy once, he was adamant that I go out on a date with him. My brother gave him my number, even after I told him not to, and I was bullied by 3 other people into going on a date with him. On the drive over to the movie theater, the guy told me that he had asked around school about me and said I had a reputation of being the weird girl who always reads. He told me that I shouldn't be reading so much, because there is such a thing as being too smart, and no one would want to be friends with, much less date, a girl like that. He even said he read it in a book once. Let's just say we didn't see or talk to each other after he dropped me home later. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.